What happens when Hollywood's quietest star walks onto the loudest late-night stage, and then walks off in silence? No tantrum. No drama. Just a moment so real, it left millions stunned. Keanu Reeves didn't storm out. He didn't yell. He just stood up, and showed the world that some memories should never be used for entertainment. This isn't just a celebrity moment. This is a lesson in dignity, pain, and the silent strength that speaks louder than applause. You're about to witness the night television cross the line, and Keanu rewrote the rules without saying a single cruel word. Late-night television thrives on noise. Big laughs. Loud bands. Celebrities trading jokes with hosts who know how to poke and prod. But when Jimmy Kimmel Live announced Keanu Reeves as a guest, the buzz was quieter. Not less intense, just different. It had been years since Keanu appeared on any major talk show. Not because he didn't have movies to promote, he did. Not because the public wasn't fascinated by him, they were. But Keanu had always been different. He didn't chase headlines. He didn't perform for attention. He walked his path quietly, like a man who had learned long ago that silence holds more power than sound. The staff backstage whispered about it days before he arrived. Some were excited. Others nervous. The producers hoped this would be the show's most viral segment of the month. Maybe the year. Keanu rarely spoke openly, so when he did, people listened. Jimmy, always the showman, had his plan. He wanted to shake things up. They would mix humor with nostalgia, a few surprises, and maybe a moment that would catch Keanu off guard just enough to go viral. His team even created a custom segment titled Matrix Moments. It would be a blend of funny childhood clips, behind-the-scenes bloopers, and a few less conventional inserts. One of them was a leaked clip, grainy footage of Keanu standing outside a hospital, clearly distressed, trying to keep to himself. It had circulated years ago on gossip sites before being buried again. Jimmy thought it would humanize him. He was wrong. The day of the interview, Keanu arrived exactly 7 minutes early. No entourage. No manager barking instructions. Just him, wearing a simple black jacket, jeans, and a soft smile. He walked into the studio carrying a faded backpack. The security guard offered him a hand. Keanu shook it with both of his. "Thanks, brother," he said softly. He greeted the staff one by one. Not out of obligation, but with real warmth. When the young intern handed him a bottle of water and stumbled over her words, Keanu smiled gently and said, "No worries. You're doing great." Inside the green room, he didn't scroll his phone. He didn't demand anything. He sat quietly, sipping tea, looking around at the framed posters of past guests on the wall. Clooney, Rihanna, Obama. He looked out of place. But not uncomfortable. Just grounded. The kind of presence that doesn't demand attention but still draws every eye. Meanwhile, Jimmy rehearsed the opening lines of his monologue. The energy in the writer's room buzzed. They were sure this was going to be good. Maybe even legendary. Keanu's the internet's boyfriend, one writer joked. Let's see how he handles a little late-night chaos. The audience was packed that night. Tickets had sold out within minutes of the announcement. Fans held up signs, some quoting The Matrix, others just thanking him for being who he was. A woman in the front row clutched a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which she'd heard Keanu loved. She wasn't wrong. The lights dimmed. The band played. Jimmy walked out, waving, cracking jokes about the news, politicians, and pop culture. It was business as usual, until he mentioned Keanu. Tonight, folks, we have a very special guest. A man who's dodged more bullets on screen than most of us dodge awkward conversations at Thanksgiving. Give it up for Keanu Reeves. Thunderous applause erupted. Keanu stepped onto the stage. But even as he smiled and waved, there was a stillness to him. A different energy. He wasn't here to put on a mask. He wasn't here to play a role. He was here because maybe something in him believed it was time. As he sat across from Jimmy, under the bright lights and rolling cameras, something shifted. The audience could feel it. They didn't know why. But they would soon. What no one expected was that this night wouldn't be remembered for jokes or stories or laughter. It would be remembered for the silence that followed. And the moment one man chose dignity over drama. The lights glared brighter under the studio ceiling, bouncing off the polished desk and glimmering off the camera lenses. Jimmy Kimmel leaned back into his usual rhythm, effortlessly charismatic, ready to guide the night like a captain steering familiar waters. Keanu sat across from him, hands gently folded, the corners of his mouth curled just enough to show a willingness to engage, but not to perform. His eyes weren't darting around the audience like many celebrities. They were calm, focused, present. Jimmy began casually. So, Keanu, you've been kind of a mystery for years. You don't do many interviews. You're not on Instagram. You've never tweeted about your lunch. What brings you to our little circus tonight? Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe I just wanted to try something different. Say yes to something I usually say no to. Ah, the good old yes man phase. Dangerous, Jimmy quipped, drawing a chuckle from the audience. Keanu nodded, unbothered. Sometimes you find honesty in unexpected places. For a moment, Jimmy blinked. He hadn't expected philosophy. He cleared his throat and reached for safer ground. Well, let's not get too deep. It's late night, not therapy. The audience laughed again. Keanu didn't. He just smiled gently, and for a second, Jimmy looked almost thrown off. Still, the conversation flowed. They touched on Keanu's new film, his motorcycle collection, his quiet donations to children's hospitals, something he never brought up, but Jimmy did. Keanu responded with gratitude, not pride. I think giving should be private, he said softly. The audience clapped. He didn't look for their approval. He never did. Then Jimmy leaned forward, eyebrows raised. All right. We've been respectful long enough. Let's lighten it up with something fun. He signaled the producers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a special new segment, just for Keanu. The studio screen lit up. Words flashed across it. Matrix moments. Cheesy sound effects played. The crowd hooped. Keanu looked up, curious. The first clip rolled. It was grainy footage from a dance competition in the 80s, showing a very young Keanu awkwardly trying to moonwalk. The crowd burst into laughter. Keanu smiled sheepishly and chuckled. That was a mistake, he said, shaking his head. Jimmy laughed. A beautiful mistake. The next clip showed him on the set of Bill and Ted, forgetting his lines and breaking into a fit of laughter. The audience loved it. Keanu leaned back, nodded. Good times. Then came a fan-made meme, Keanu in monk robes, photoshopped into a Marvel battle scene. He laughed harder this time. Impressive editing, he said. The vibe was light, warm, fun. Then the screen shifted again. What came next wiped the smile from his face. It was different. The footage was darker, less polished. It showed Keanu outside a hospital, alone, dressed in black, head lowered, hands trembling as he tried to avoid cameras. Paparazzi had captured the moment. It was the day he lost someone. His longtime partner. Years ago. He had never spoken of it publicly. The crowd fell silent. Jimmy tried to keep the energy up. Wow, that one got a little real there. Sorry folks, we try to keep things upbeat around here. He glanced nervously at Keanu, trying to laugh it off. Didn't mean to make you relive the sad Keanu days, my man. Keanu looked at him. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that carries weight. He didn't blink. Didn't speak. And yet, the whole room felt it. That shift. That uncomfortable truth. A line had been crossed, and they all knew it. Jimmy fumbled for control. Hey, it was just a clip. I mean, we all have bad days, right? Still no answer from Keanu. The audience didn't laugh. Some turned their eyes downward. Others looked at Keanu with guilt, like they had invaded something sacred. Because they had. And Jimmy was starting to realize it too. He leaned in again. Hey man, you all right? Keanu finally spoke. His voice was soft, but firm. There are things you laugh at, he said. And then there are things you leave alone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It echoed in the silence anyway. Jimmy sat back, unsure what to say. For the first time in a long time, he had no punchline. And somewhere in the crowd, a woman quietly whispered, "Good for him." What happened next would change everything. The silence in the studio was suffocating. Jimmy Kimmel, usually so quick on his feet, now sat frozen. His smile wavered. His hands, once confidently gesturing through the air, dropped to his lap like broken tools. Across from him, Keanu Reeves sat still, not angry, not emotional, just quiet. And that silence spoke louder than anything Jimmy had ever heard on his stage. A few audience members shifted in their seats. Others just watched, stunned, like they were witnessing something not meant to be televised. Jimmy tried again, voice lower now. "Look, Keanu, we didn't mean anything by that clip. Our producers, maybe they crossed a line." Keanu turned his eyes to the crowd. He looked at them, not with accusation, not even disappointment, but with something softer. Sadness, maybe. Recognition. A quiet understanding that the world had become too casual with pain. That somewhere along the way, we started mistaking vulnerability for content. He stood up. No words. Just a smooth, quiet rise from his seat. Jimmy blinked, confused. "Wait, are you leaving?" Keanu looked down at him and, for a moment, it felt like time stopped. "Some things," Keanu said calmly, "aren't meant to be jokes. Some memories are sacred." He placed his microphone gently on the armrest of the chair, not slammed, not thrown, but as if returning something borrowed. Then, with grace, he turned and walked off stage. No anger. No scene. Just the weight of a man who had been hurt publicly, again, and chose to protect his dignity instead of feeding the moment. The cameras didn't know what to do. They stayed wide, trying to follow him as he disappeared behind the curtain. The director frantically waved for a commercial break. The screen went black. But in that darkness, the moment had already lit a fire online. Backstage, the energy was chaos. Producers yelled into headsets. Assistants scrambled. Somebody ran after Keanu. He was already near the exit, slipping his backpack over one shoulder when a young woman, barely out of college, caught up to him. She looked like she wanted to say something but was frozen. He noticed. "You all right?" he asked, voice still calm. She nodded slowly, tears pooling in her eyes. I'm sorry. I saw the clip before the show. I didn't say anything. I should have." Keanu didn't scold her. He didn't preach. He simply smiled, a tired but kind smile. "It's okay. We all make choices. Just try to choose better next time." And with that, he walked into the night. No security. No press release. No retaliation. Only peace. Inside the studio, Jimmy sat alone at the desk, the cameras off, the audience hushed. His team hovered nearby, unsure whether to comfort him or let him sit in it. He looked down at the desk where Keanu had placed the mic. He thought about the joke. The segment. The moment that changed everything. And for the first time in years, Jimmy didn't feel like a host. He felt like a man who had been taught a lesson, not by a punchline, but by someone who chose grace over ego. That night, social media exploded. Clips of the moment flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. But the tone was different. No memes. No jokes. Just respect. People didn't mock Keanu. They praised him. For his restraint. For his quiet courage. For walking away from a world that expected him to laugh at his own pain. #hashtag Respect Keanu trended for 48 hours. Celebrities chimed in. Journalists debated the ethics of talk shows mining real trauma for ratings. And somewhere, in a quiet room, Keanu Reeves turned off his phone and picked up a book. He didn't need the applause. He didn't seek revenge. He had said all he needed to say, by saying nothing at all. The walkout wasn't a tantrum. It was a mirror. And everyone watching had to decide what they saw in their reflection. For most talk show controversies, the world forgets in a few days. A headline trends. A clip goes viral. And then, silence. But this wasn't like that. Keanu's quiet walkout didn't spark outrage. It stirred something deeper, A collective reflection. People weren't angry. They were ashamed. Not just of Jimmy, but of themselves. Of how easily pain had become entertainment. How we'd all laughed at moments we didn't understand, simply because the screen told us it was okay. Overnight, the YouTube upload of the episode received hundreds of thousands of comments. But not the usual emojis or one-liners. These were long, heartfelt confessions. I used to laugh at those paparazzi clips. Not anymore. This man just taught me what grace looks like. One comment read simply, "He walked away and I felt it in my chest." Jimmy Kimmel didn't post anything that night. He didn't tweet. Didn't joke. Didn't appear on social media at all. His team was in full damage control, but Jimmy was thinking. He watched the clip over and over. The moment Keanu stood. The way he placed the mic down. The line that kept echoing in his head, "Some memories are sacred." For the first time in a long time, Jimmy wasn't thinking like a comedian. He was thinking like a human being who had just witnessed the quiet power of integrity and had been humbled by it. The next evening, the studio lights came on again. The crowd was tense. They didn't know if Keanu would be mentioned, or if the show would move on like nothing happened. But Jimmy didn't hide. He walked onto the stage, no music, no cheering. Just him. He stood at center stage, holding a piece of paper he never looked at. "Last night," he began, "we aired something we shouldn't have. I said something I shouldn't have." And a man walked away from this stage not in anger, but in silence. And that silence said more than any joke ever could. He paused, looking into the lens. Not for drama, but for honesty. "I crossed a line. I thought I was being funny. I thought I was making a moment. What I made was a mistake." He looked down. That clip, the one that should have never made it to air, was a real moment of pain for Keanu Reeves. A personal memory captured without his consent. And I used it for entertainment. Jimmy exhaled slowly. There's no excuse. And there's no clever punchline to end this. Only an apology. A real one. He raised his eyes again. "Keanu, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I don't expect you to come back. I don't even expect forgiveness. But I needed you, and everyone watching, to hear me say it out loud. We messed up. I messed up. And I'll do better." The crowd was quiet. Not unsure, just moved. Then, a single clap. Then, another. Soon, the room was applauding, not for a joke, not for a show, but for accountability. For the rare moment when someone in power admits they were wrong. Later that night, Keanu's name trended again. But it wasn't for a response. He hadn't posted anything. Hadn't commented. Hadn't appeared on any show. Instead, a reporter caught sight of him at a local shelter, quietly volunteering, handing out food, smiling gently as if nothing had happened. When asked if he had seen the apology, Keanu nodded. "I saw it," he said. "It was honest. That's all that matters." The reporter tried to ask more, but Keanu waved it off, stepping back into the kitchen to help a man carry crates of bread. He never returned to Jimmy's show. Not because of bitterness, but because he didn't need to. He had walked away with his dignity intact, and left behind a lesson the world didn't know it needed. In a time when everyone fights to be louder, funnier, more shocking, Keanu reminded the world that silence, when rooted in truth, can echo louder than any scream. He didn't slam a door. He didn't demand an apology. He simply stood up for his past, and walked out of the spotlight with grace. And in doing so, he became a mirror. Not just for Jimmy, but for all of us. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Share it. Because in a world full of noise, sometimes silence is the loudest truth. Subscribe for more stories that don't scream. They speak. And if you've ever walked away to protect your peace, you're not alone. Keanu reminded us, dignity doesn't need an audience. Join us. Because real strength doesn't need a stage. It just needs to be remembered.